So I want to show a trick that I've learned for making animation tweaks inside of Blender this is going to be using the character creator character, or a character from iClone, and using the Rigify system. So just keep that in mind. But this is some cool tricks for modifying a motion capture setup. And of course, this can be really useful, because if we're rendering and we find out, oh, you know what, the motion of the character is just a little bit off, well, we don't want to have to export to other animation programs. Like, as amazing as the Cascadeur program is, that's something I hope to incorporate in my workflow, but exporting is a pain. And so, for things like final tweaks, it'd be nice if we had a system that allowed us to make minor adjustments, really easily inside of Blender. So, assuming that we're using the Rigify system and that we're using forward kinematics as our base layer, and we'll be switching back and forth between inverse kinematics for the positioning and then forward kinematics for the actual animation. So just keep that in mind. Also, some other setup things here. I've made sure that we have an NLA animation layer, animation clip, and made sure that the blending is set to combine. Also make sure that you don't have any of these stars turned on, or else that's going to solo certain tracks and it won't work very well. It won't work at all. And then finally, we have auto keying on, just to make things a little bit simpler. So let's imagine we want this hand raised a little bit. I can easily do that by moving this bone here. If we want to get a preview of what that will look like, I can press the IK to FK. And now the terminology is a little bit confusing, because this is actually, yeah, let's see. Actually, we'll use this here in a second. For right now, I'm going to use FK to IK. And of course, that's going to make sense that our forward kinematics are now being mapped to our inverse kinematic bone. A little bit confusing, but just bear with me. Now, let's say we want to move, let's say maybe we just create another keyframe here, and maybe another one here. And of course, you'll see that things stay pretty still, and but we do still have the overall motion of the motion capture. Now I'm gonna actually undo that, because I want something a little bit different, and I'm going to snap the inverse kinematic bone to the forward kinematics. And if I want to get a preview here, unfortunately the workflow here is not super polished, but this is what we have to work with. So I can get a preview by switching this slider and maybe positioning the hand exactly where I want, let's say there. And then I'm going to switch back so that we can see the preview correctly for the animation, and I'm going to hit FK to IK, and now we have this transition here. It's a little bit abrupt, and for making tweaks, say to the head or small tweaks, we probably don't want to have big fast movements, otherwise we're just doing animation. But we want to have, subtle changes, subtle position changes, and that might be, we really probably don't want to mess with a whole lot of motion inside of Blender. There are other at least not for the workflow that I'm using. There are other programs that are better suited for that. But this allows us to, if we need to, if something is not working, especially for the eyes and head, are probably going to be the primary things that I expect to be off and not 100%, especially for different camera angles. So that's just something that I thought, hey, this might come in handy. And of course, when we're done, we want to turn off auto keying. But right now, I'll leave it on. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And again, just as a reminder, if we are positioning, basically if we're making a keyframe, we want to use this option. If we're previewing where the for previewing the exact positioning, we want to make the inverse kinematic snap to the forward kinematics and then turn this slider off. It's not a very polished workflow, but it does provide us with some options inside of Blender. Now, and again, just one more note about how this works under the hood. We're using this bone to position, so we can basically position our arm, and then because we're snapping the forward kinematics to the inverse kinematic bone, we basically get all these keyframes that are mapped to the forward kinematics bones, and then they're combined with the original animation, and that helps us kind of mix and match the different parts of our animation. I think that's all the pieces. We really could actually ignore the inverse kinematic keyframes themselves. If they get too messy here, they really don't do anything. So we certainly could erase them. We could also add all of the forward kinematic keyframes to the inverse kinematic bone, but I've found that doesn't seem to work very well. So I might have to experiment with that, but I found the forward kinematics seem to work better, whereas doing it the other way with this method seems to make it override completely, and then it just goes back to looking computerized and not very good. So that's not very effective. And then finally, we have the auto keying for making sure that our forward kinematic bones are getting those keys, and then everything works together nicely. So what I have here again is not super great, but if we needed to make a small tweak, especially a subtle tweak, this should just work just fine. So that's pretty much it. I hope to have some more videos like this, especially related to animation. So if you're interested in watching those, please consider liking this video, subscribing, hitting the notification bell, sharing this video with friends, and all that good stuff.